Boot up the Switch 2 menu, and this is what you hear. Nothing. It's totally silent, the same as the original Switch. But that's not how things used to be. On the Wii, DSi, Wii U, and 3DS, there was quirky, vibey music on the home screen, eShop, and even the settings menu. So, in this video, I want to explore what made that music so great. We'll talk about the history of Nintendo's menu music, take a look at the composers responsible for these iconic tunes, and uncover why Nintendo decided that what the Switch needed was total silence. Part 1. No menu, no music. So let's start at the beginning, Nintendo's first major game console, the NES. The NES had no operating system and no home screen. You put in a game cartridge and the game booted up. No cartridge, you'd be met with a black screen and total silence. No home music to speak of. This was the status quo for almost every early Nintendo console. There was no home menu and no visible operating system at all. The Game Boy and GBA had startup jingles, as did the Japan-exclusive Famicom Disk System. A few years later came the N64 disk drive, which had a similar jingle if you turned it on with no disc inserted. But Nintendo's first proper piece of menu music came in 1995, introducing the Satellaview, a Japanese add-on for the SNES, which received data from live satellite broadcasts. Pretty nifty. And the Satellaview had not only a menu, but a whole virtual world to explore, featuring not just one, but multiple pieces of music. This is arguably Nintendo's first console menu music, but it's not exactly mainstream. So, to summarize, from the NES up to the N64, Nintendo's consoles didn't really have menus, and so no menu themes either. There was the odd jingle and Japanese exclusive curio, but that was about it. Until 2001, that is, when Nintendo's menus changed forever. Part 2. What does a menu sound like? The year is 2001, it's the start of a new millennium, and Nintendo's just released their newest home console, the GameCube. You queue up on launch day, eager to get your hands on this exciting new piece of hardware, and when you boot it up, you hear this. That is the iconic GameCube startup theme. It was written by legendary Nintendo composer Toru Minegishi, who's worked on countless Zelda, Animal Crossing, and Splatoon titles. And in 2001, not long before the release of the GameCube, and only 3 years after Minegishi joined Nintendo, he was given a new assignment: to write the GameCube's startup jingle. He said in an interview, "I created the hardware startup sound for the Nintendo GameCube. The deadline was very tight for that job, and I didn't have enough time to come up with very many ideas. I imagined the melody in my head, and I was thrilled that my idea was chosen." But while this theme is certainly iconic, that's not really what we're here to talk about. Because the GameCube also featured, for the first time in Nintendo's history, a full-fledged operating system. Whether you've inserted a game disc or not, boot up the GameCube and you'll be met with this menu. You can adjust audio settings, change the current date and time, and see all the save data from the various games you've played. And in the background, you can hear this. It's a very simple, ambient piece of music. No percussion, no jazzy chords, just a couple of synths playing a slow, haunting melody. Actually, that melody hides an interesting secret. Speed up the GameCube menu theme, and it might sound familiar. It's the Famicom Disk System melody. At the tempo heard on the GameCube's menu, you'd never recognize this melody's origin, but it's a neat secret. It's not known who's responsible for the GameCube's excellent ambient theme. It could be Toru Minegishi, who wrote the startup jingle, or perhaps someone else like Hajime Wakai, who wrote the music for Pikmin 1, 2, and 3. Something about the instruments here certainly reminds me a little of those early Pikmin soundtracks. But regardless of who arranged this theme, for millions of GameCube owners, the console's simple yet haunting menu theme marked the prelude to many a gaming session. With it, Nintendo established a precedent for the kind of vibe a menu theme should evoke: ambient, subtle, contemplative. And only a few years later, a different composer at the company would take that vibe and run with it. Part 3. The Sound of the Wii. This is Kazumi Totaka. He entered Nintendo in 1990, writing music for games like Mario Paint, Yoshi's Story, Luigi's Mansion, Animal Crossing, and so many more. Totaka is one of my personal favourite Nintendo composers. He's got a really distinctive bossa nova-inspired style. But around the end of 2005, a new assignment came Totaka's way. He was to write all of the system music for Nintendo's next console, the Wii. Now, from the start, the Wii was a new kind of game console. Nintendo president Satoru Iwata asked the hardware team to have the console be no bigger than 2 stacked DVD cases, and discussions quickly focused on a more casual-oriented system. 2 slogans were decided on: fun for the entire family and something new every day. The new OS would show weather, news, and even include a digital shop. But for a while, the design team, led by developer Tomoaki Kurome, didn't know how best to present all of this information. Then there was a breakthrough. One thing that really clicked in our minds when we were talking over how to make things more understandable was the image of rows of TVs in an electronics shop. Lots of screens, lots of channels, all lined up. And thus, the iconic Wii menu was born. So, in late 2005, Kazumi Totaka was shown this new UI and told to write music for it. Unlike the GameCube, which only had a single piece of menu music, the Wii menu would have various tunes for each channel. Let's start with the overall menu theme. This theme is a classic example of what's known as ambient music. Brian Eno, the pioneer of ambient music, released an album in 1978 called Music for Airports. It's made up of 4 pieces of calming electronic music, which were designed not to grab the listener's attention, but instead to fade into the background. Totaka used a similar approach with the menu theme. It's full of repeating, interlocking arpeggios played on a soft, calming synthesizer. Like Music for Airports, this theme is designed to fade into the background. That is a lesson Totaka learned early on in his time at Nintendo. When I first joined the company, the manager of the sound section at the time told me, "The music is too loud, it should be quieter," while playtesting a game. This was a huge shock for me at the time. I couldn't believe a composer would say their own music should be quieter. But not all of the music was designed to fade into the background. For the Wii Shop Channel, Totaka wrote one of his trademark bossa nova tunes. Bossa nova has long been associated with shops and shopping, especially in the world of video games. It's a perfect fit here. And then lastly, and most iconic of all, there's the Mii Channel theme. For this channel, Totaka again drew on some bossa nova inspiration, writing a piece of music in the muzak genre. Muzak, with a Z, is a jazz subgenre from the 20th century, consisting of music written for businesses, workplaces, and most famously, elevators. In other words, the Mii Channel theme is Kazumi Totaka's take on, well, elevator music. Now, these are just 3 of the many, many themes Totaka wrote for the Wii's operating system. Forecast, news, shopping, photos. Each channel needed multiple pieces of music. In the years since, some of these themes have gone on to become truly iconic. Totaka struck a perfect balance of music that could fade into the background, but somehow, subconsciously, would get wedged in your mind. And the following Nintendo consoles followed in the Wii's footsteps. Listen to the home menu theme from the DSi, or the 3DS. And you can hear an eerily similar sound to that of the Wii menu. The Wii U, as well, adopts a similar ambient vibe, though I think it has a slightly spacier, more futuristic sound. All of that is to say that from 2006 onwards, players had been trained to expect some kind of ambient menu music from Nintendo's consoles, not just on the home menu, but in the Mii Maker, the eShop, even the settings screen. Except, in 2017, all of that was thrown out the window. Part 4. Silence. When Nintendo released the Switch in 2017, its menu featured no music, no subtle background melodies, no calming synthesizers. It's total silence. But why? Well, let's step back a little. From the Wii to the 3DS to the Wii U, each Nintendo console had become more complex in its operating system. The Wii U's dual screen menu, littered with buttons and icons and Mii's roaming around, was undeniably full of charm, but it was also slow and bloated. With each Nintendo console, the time it took to actually get into a game had grown longer and longer. So, when Nintendo began work on the Wii U's successor, the Nintendo Switch, the UI team were keen to reverse this trend. The Switch's menu would go back to basics. It would be snappy, responsive, and simple. Looking around, we saw a number of multi-purpose devices which could play games, so we decided to return to our gaming roots, making the Switch straightforward, clear, and uncluttered. In fact, the entire Switch user interface takes up less than 200 kilobytes of storage. That's about 1 second of CD quality audio. Very impressive. And that simplifying down of focus extended to the sound too. According to Masato Onishi, the man in charge of the Switch's sound design, removing the background music was a conscious decision, not just to make sure the UI was super fast and responsive, but also to put the focus on the games themselves. The team instead put their energy into creating snappy, satisfying sound effects. In Onishi's own words, the Switch is designed to be game-centric, so we've omitted background music. And that makes a lot of sense. While the Wii U's operating system is a ton of fun and features some great tunes, it almost feels like there's more focus on the home menu, on the UI, than the actual games themselves, especially at launch when the Wii U barely had any games. But with the Switch, the focus was squarely back on the games, and sadly, that also meant no more background music. That same approach extended to Nintendo's next console, the Switch 2. Again, there's not a single piece of background music heard in the console menus, except for one chill tune when first setting up your new console. When asked why the Switch 2 eShop didn't have any music, Switch 2 producer Koichi Kawamoto said, "Unlike back then, the eShop now has lots of videos that are showcasing the games. We didn't want to intrude on that, so we don't have any music there." This mirrors a lot of what Nintendo's UI team said about the original Switch. And again, there's also the performance angle to look at. Kawamoto continued, "I wanted to make sure that it was a smooth experience, that the scrolling of the list doesn't stall, that it's very smooth, pages load fast." However, the Switch 2 does lean further into the fun sound effects that Masato Onishi added to the original Switch. Pressing each of the buttons along the bottom of the home screen plays a brand new sound effect. These new sound effects manage to convey a lot of personality in just a second of audio. In particular, the new home button sound effect is a lot of fun, which is lucky since you'll hear it every time you launch the home menu. So, ultimately, for the Switch and Switch 2, Nintendo wanted to focus on two things: the games and the performance of the console and its menus. Neither of those points meant that UI music was impossible to include. I can absolutely imagine a short, looping piece of ambient music similar to that of the GameCube, which would only use a little storage space and wouldn't draw too much attention from the games. But at the same time, there's something pure and focused about Nintendo's decisions when it came to the Switch UI. 10 years from now, no one will be nostalgically remembering the hours spent scrolling through the home menu or the Switch eShop, but hopefully they will have fond memories of Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Odyssey, and Donkey Kong Bonanza. So, in 2020, with the release of Animal Crossing New Horizons, Kazumi Totaka was interviewed about his new game's soundtrack. It was 15 years after Totaka had written what is probably the most distinctive and beloved set of console menu themes in gaming history, the Wii menu music. But in this interview, Totaka emphasized that for Animal Crossing, a light touch was key. More important than the music itself were the gaps between it, moments where you could stop, take in the calming scenery, the rivers, the trees. Sometimes the lack of music is key, he said. Perhaps that applies to the Switch's home screen as well. Still, if you're wondering if you're the only one who spent hours jamming out to the Wii Shop theme, don't worry, you're in good company. Koichi Kawamoto, producer of the Switch 2 console, said this in an interview. "I probably booted the Wii Shopping Channel the most out of any application on the Wii." Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. I love game music, and in particular, I find this kind of subtle menu music really fascinating. Videos like this are possible thanks to the kind support of my patrons, including Aaron and Catherine, Arthur Nicole, Bones Vivi, Brett and Eric, Cyprian Eov, The Real Procyon, Daryl Jero, Ellie Birnbaum, Eliza the Doe, Fresh Poetic, Jim Gilsonan, Kieran Chan, Lucas Little, Michael Gunter, Robin Stick, Skator Pie, and Thomas Söderlund.